Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Hey, Alex. Yeah, doing pretty well. Just lurking in the dark, having some camera difficulty. So please excuse the lack of vision.
That's all right. That's all right. It's been a long international break, and we've definitely made it all the longer by delaying the podcast episode, I guess, towards the end of the week. But we do have a fresh city fixture to look forward to. I guess I'd say tomorrow night our time, but I don't actually know what time it is in the UK. It's probably about 24 hours away, essentially. So we've got that to look forward to. But look, we'll look back on that Reading fixture first of all, which was just before the international break, a 1-1 draw. A game in which we did look pretty good for patches, but I guess sort of typical of us in recent weeks, and I guess with the sort of the churn in that final third in terms of personnel and who we've had available, just don't seem to have that fluency to really finish teams off.
No, not at all. And I think it in so many ways kind of speaks to this stage of the season where we're located on the ladder. It's a really tricky period of football to play because, as we talked about a few weeks ago, there was that promotion push kind of hope. And then as soon as that kind of evaporated and with no real seeming threat of being in any, relegation danger, it's just a difficult time to play. It's hard to get up for the fixtures. And yeah, like we said, like if we were in a promotion push, I think this game would be a huge cause of frustration. But, although it's still somewhat frustrating, and I still believe that we certainly should have taken the 3 points. There is a large part of it where we're kind of resigned to, our fate this season. And therefore you can kind of get to sleep at night, regardless of, how disappointing the result was on its merit.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to see at the end of the season how many 1-1 draws we end up with, because I feel like that's got to be our most common scoreline. And it feels like, as you say, it's that frustration. But at this point of the season, I guess the ship sort of sailed on the promotion push. So it's not as frustrating as it could have been. But you just imagine, you got the Blackpool and the Sunderland and Reading now and a few others as well. I think the Huddersfield as well, all 1-1 draws. You think if we turn that into the 3 points that it shows the potential we have heading into next season with the way that we've been able to keep in these games, and it's just about turning those draws into victories. But talking about the potential for next season, I guess talking about our goal, the way it was constructed out from the back, passing move, Seri into Slater, into Traore back to Slater to get the goal, really highlights Rosenior's philosophy and his way of playing and the way that it's starting to really come through in the players and the positive outcomes that can come of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of, again, I feel like a broken record here, but it was something that we did talk about when Rosenior was appointed. Like he did ask for those exact things. He was very clear with, his playing philosophy and how he kind of wanted the club to operate. And he did say it would take time. He also mentioned that there were going to be mistakes and that, the fans were going to have to be patient. And yeah, as you said, there's definitely, shades of what he's trying to, instill in the club. And yeah, that goal from Regan Slater was a fantastic, full team, I guess, kind of involvement and a really, kind of stellar finish and a well-worked goal. So yeah, look, you're starting to see the fingerprints of Rosenior kind of taking shape. And yeah, as you mentioned, like it's a very pleasing and optimistic, place we find ourselves in, given the fact that, there's been periods this year where, we have kind of thought about the concept of being relegated and how it could be a real threat. So, full credit to him. Although, in the same breath, we're talking about it feels somewhat, hopeless at the moment because of where we sit and the fact that there's, a lot of kind of seemingly meaningless football to be played. That's actually a really good position to be in, given where we have fallen to this season.
Yeah, that's right. It's a great reminder, actually, of where we were, 2 months into the season under Shotter. It feels such a long time ago that we were in that relegation scrap. Even the first couple of weeks or months under Rosenior, really, it was still a potential risk, and we really pulled away from that. Yeah, it's easy to forget that. And as you say, I mean, we've got a few, I guess, pointless games in a sense to play out the season with. Only a couple of those left now as well, though. I mean, it's really coming to the pointy end at both ends of the table. I guess just a last comment on this game as well, a bit of the controversy around a couple of incidents. I guess the handball off a Abioe shot at, I think it was at 1-0, and then sort of a similar one in the second half with Coyle, although that one, I guess, more debatably outside the box. Interesting in the aftermath. I mean, Rosenior pretty fiery with the referee after the game. I think he got a yellow card for his troubles. But the PGMOL, I think, have pretty much come out and, without saying it in as many words, almost acknowledged Rosenior was right in the sense that the particular referee was also in charge of the previous fixture between the two teams and had a few controversial incidents. Shouldn't have been the one to take this fixture on. There's definitely a lot of suggestions for this incident, as well as a few others, that potentially strengthening the case for VAR to be introduced in the championship. But, you never want to blame the drop points on a refereeing performance because, of course, at the end of the day, it's up to us to put the ball in the back of the net. But it is a frustratingly kind of common recurrence in the league that there are these examples of poorer quality refereeing displays impacting games.
Yeah, definitely. And you can kind of go down that argument of like technology in sport and VAR and things like that being made kind of universal and going throughout the leagues. But yeah, it is a tough one because I know that everyone kind of runs with that cliche with eventually it balances out. As a fan, it doesn't always feel like that. And as I kind of already alluded to before, given the importance of this game, not really having as much, it's hard to be as connected. But
Yeah.
on the flip side, if this was a top six kind of promotion push game and that happened, the stakes are a lot higher, and I think that that's where you really do start to get into that the referee conspiracy theories, and it's difficult to stomach, particularly in a league where there is a lot of financial kind of importance of like what getting promoted means for a club and the sponsors and what also getting relegated or falling outside the six and the potential playoff berths. Like there's some huge things at stake, and I think that's where this discussion is important and one that has to be had. If it is a recurring problem and there's enough talk about it, and there is a clear golfing class between, say, the quality of official that's being delivered in the Premier League week in, week out with the technology, it does make for a very interesting case.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the off season in that regard. But as you say, I mean, for the importance of the fixture, it didn't really mean too much. Look, we can move on then. We'll talk about a few other things. But if you had MVP votes for this game, if you wanted to give those.
Yeah, so I think I had Slater as my 3, and I think that I probably just clouded vision because of how important the goal was, and I guess it was just such a well worked goal. I think I probably had Traore for my 2 points, and then 1 point probably. I want to say Seri would probably take my 1, but again. I'm not entirely sold on that 1 point, but I do think Seri was in the mix.
Yeah, look, I was the same as you. I mean, I swapped my 3 and 2. I went Traore for the 3 and Slater for the 2. But again, for that one vote, it was really hard to pick someone out. I think I went Seri as well. You could have probably given it to any number of players who put in a reasonable performance, but there was probably those 2 standout performances. And then Seri can get it by virtue of a pretty decent midfield display. Look, just a few things of off-field discussion before we move on to the preview. Obviously, with the game against Rotherham, it is the preview as well. But, from an off-field perspective, the fact that we're looking at getting about 23,000 in attendance for this one, the ticket deal that Ajun's put on for the game, West Upper is open. I think the lower bowl has actually fully sold out, which is awesome to see. Biggest crowd in about 5 or 6 years is just brilliant. And, for a game that, just talking about the Reading game not having much significance, neither does this one. I mean, probably a bit more significance with the Yorkshire derby element of it, but all the same, from a City perspective, not a whole lot riding on it. Obviously massive for Rotherham in their relegation battle, but to see such a huge crowd come out for an essentially meaningless game is awesome.
Oh, absolutely. And again, like it's the same talking points, but we just have to give credit to to the owner and the manager and just what they're kind of trying to build. Like it's worked. It's brought the fans back. It's really changed the perspective of a lot of the the stay away fans, and it's just a really nice thing to see the MKM with that many bums on seats again, given that really strenuous period where it wasn't the case. And I think that looking back on it now, we probably missed out on some pretty interesting signings and things along the way because we weren't necessarily a big draw card of a club to play for, given that situation, and it did linger for extended period of time. So it's just really. It's a great thing as a fan to be able to watch football played the way it should be played in front of a packed house and in a great stadium. So full credit, and it's great to see the health of the club return to where we expect it to be and want it to be.
Absolutely, couldn't say it better myself. Okay, well, before we do that preview, we'll do a quick round of who am I. Speaking of former players and potential signings, if you're good to go for a quick game of who am I.
Let's do it.
I do think this is one that could come down to the player initials. I will warn you in advance. So I'll be very impressed if you're able to grab this one. But I made 32 appearances for City and I scored 2 league goals.
32 appearances for City, 2 league goals. All right, so we're probably looking at maybe one and a bit seasons. More likely a loan spell than a permanent transfer. I'm going to go out on a limb. Okay. I feel like I'm going to need another clue only because I still don't know the time period, which is probably the thing that makes it the most difficult.
So I joined City in 2013. So first Premier League season under Bruce. I departed in 2015 and I had a loan spell to Wolves in 2014.
A loan spell to Wolves. Okay. Oh, 2013. Is this Stephen Hunt?
Oh, it's really no. So he would have been 2010. But
am I right in saying? Is I right in saying that he did go to Wolves?
He did go to Wolves. Yeah. So you're in the right ballpark. Just slightly off in the years, but there you go. Do you have another guess at this clue, or I can give you the next one?
Oh, at Wolves. I feel like that's reduced it a lot. There can't be many that have gone to Wolves. 2013. It feels like a long time ago. All right, I need another clue.
Okay, so I played as a striker and I wore the number 20.
Oh, okay. I'm going to kick myself if I've got this jersey at home. I probably don't, but it's just number 20 is a very rare
Made
number.
Famous by Bowen, but yeah, not many other big signings.
Oh, this one's going to hurt. I'm going to really struggle with.
If I can give you the club we signed him from, see if that. I don't know if that's going to help much, to be honest. So we signed him from Evian in France.
Oh, okay. I think the only player that I remember coming would be Yannick Sagbo.
Spot on. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, that's 10 years ago. That
10 years ago, exactly.
Very interesting. Time flies. Okay.
Absolutely. Nice one. Yeah, you got it. Actually, because I realized when I said the Wolves link, I was like, yeah, you're right. There's not many players that go from us to Wolves, so it does narrow it down a bit. But there you go. Nice one.
I remember being linked with Yannick Sagbo for a long time. I remember Steve Bruce made it very clear that he was interested, and I can't remember why it took so long. But that's the kind of the very distant memories that I have. But I know that Bruce was very keen on him, and it took quite some persuasion to get him across eventually.
Was it Sagbo who in maybe his second game against Norwich? Yeah, I think it was. Got the red card.
For a headbutt, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've had a few strikers who've had that, because I think Sagbo, Mbakani, and then obviously most recently Tete. So couple of strikers, getting red cards before their first goals for us.
Very interesting.
There you go. All right, so we'll round things off with that preview of the Rotherham game. We've already said looking like being as close to a sellout as we're going to have this season anyway. Matt Taylor in charge there after taking over from Paul Warne, who of course went to Derby to replace Liam Rosenior. So bit of musical chairs with the managers involved in this game, which is a bit of a funny one. But Rotherham have 2 wins in their last 5 games in the league, but they've lost their last 2. And we've only got 1 loss in our last 5 against them, of course, as well, having beaten them in the FA Cup, if I'm thinking of the right. I always get them mixed up because there's a few different R teams that we've played recently in the FA Cup. But if I'm not mistaken, it is Rotherham that Eve's got his hat-trick against, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the 3-2 game, I think. Yeah, a really good, a really enjoyable game to watch. Yeah, it definitely was Rotherham.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so obviously I sort of alluded to it earlier, but big game for them for the relegation fight. I'll just have a look at where they actually are in the table. I think they're a couple of points above the relegation zone at the moment. They've sort of pulled themselves a bit clear of that battle with a few recent performances picking up points, but they're not clear yet by any means. So they're 4 points clear of Huddersfield. So in that sort of really awkward position where they're kind of probably unsure about, do they have to go out and beat us to really kind of pull away? Is a draw good enough, or like how much are they looking over their shoulders? So it'll be interesting from that perspective in terms of how they approach the game.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess, you think about it being a Yorkshire derby as well, probably adds an extra element to it. And I guess if you want to even stretch it a little bit further, thinking about the team that they sit above, Huddersfield also being a Yorkshire team. So there will be a lot of feeling in this game, regardless of, how important it is for us. It's definitely a far more important fixture for them, which, does make things a little bit more tricky, on our front. And it'd be very interesting to see how we approach this game, because as you said, our recent form has been quite handy. And, you never want to give away points to particularly a local rival. So be fascinating fixture.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, it's interesting thinking about our squad availability. Obviously, Tete and Christie out for the season, but otherwise, it's almost a clean bill of health for the squad for what feels like the first time this season. I think Connolly, Woods, and Ingram should all be back, either fit to start or fit to come off the bench as needed, which is really good news. I think Darlow presumably would hold his spot as the number one between the sticks, but whether Connolly comes back in up front, so we could see him and Ebue flanking Oscar, for instance, it's going to be really interesting to see what we do with the lineup.
Yeah, it will be fascinating. And I actually do kind of wonder if Rosenior does look at this game as an opportunity to, do some squad rotation and name a somewhat changed squad purely on the merit of getting some, some minutes into some legs of players who haven't played, much in recent times. I feel like it's kind of got that feel where it's a big game at home. And when I say a big game, at least a big crowd. And I think it's probably one of those free hit games where he could afford to try and do something like that. He may, as you mentioned, may just kind of tinker with it a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a pretty, funky lineup rolled out, this time tomorrow night.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, you think about guys like Woods, if he's potentially fit to start, whether you throw Woods and Simons in there just to see what different midfield combinations look like. I sort of feel like we're at that point of the season where it's really about knowing what players he wants to take into next season. He wants to know what players work in what systems and whether they're up to different formations and different structures, or whether they're not really going to be the sorts of players to come along for the journey next season. So, you wouldn't want to be, I mean, in a way, it's the perfect environment for someone like a Callum Elder who really wants to prove their point in the squad, and you can't do that sat on the bench. So you're going to get those chances to play when there's nothing on the line, when the manager's more willing to tinker with the lineup than if we're in a relegation battle, he's naming his best 11, and then the players on the periphery get cold at the end of the season. It gives, your Woods and your Elder and all those guys that chance to really prove themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's amazing, particularly for some of those, players that you mentioned, what goals can do as well, like late in the piece, particularly as like the off season kind of lingers. If you finish with a bit of a flurry as well, I know that you don't always like to think this way, but as far as the transfer market goes, like your stock goes up and teams start to become a little bit more interested when they see numbers. So yeah, you kind of never know what's going on in the player's head. But I'm really interested to see what lineup actually gets rolled out and to see who's still kind of, how do I describe it? Still chomping at the bit for those big performances, because it often says a lot as far as looking forward to next season and who wants their intentions as a player to kind of be revealed. So yeah, it's an interesting period.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Do you have a score prediction for this one?
Look, this one's a tricky one, as we mentioned, because Rotherham do still have a lot to play for. I think that the fact that there is going to be such a big crowd there probably does favour City. I think that, given the fact that, like, obviously that sounds like the most ludicrous statement that favours us because we're playing at home in front of a big crowd, but the fact that there will be a lot of feeling in it, and knowing that Rotherham do have a lot more pressure on them than we do, I just feel like they're probably more likely to play, when I say in their shell, a little bit nervous. And I think that because of that, we may be able to really kind of play with freedom while they're a little bit tense. And I think that that'll probably lead to a couple of, at least one sneaky goal. I reckon we're going to win 2-0.
Yeah, I'm feeling 2-0 as well. Maybe a 2-1 if they throw everything at us and get something on the scoreboard. I've got Ogbene and Hugel up front, who are pretty dangerous propositions. I think they're the ones to watch out for in this one. Be interesting to see if Eves can get on the park against us. I don't actually know if he's fit at the moment, but yeah, probably a 2-0 or a 2-1 for myself. Look, there's only 8 games to go in the season. Be 7 after this one, so we're getting pretty close to the end of the season now. We're into that final stretch, as the title of this episode suggests. So it'll be very interesting to see how the season finishes off. But look, thanks for joining me for this one, Logan.
Yeah, my pleasure, Alex. Good to be here as always.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening along. We'll be back next week, probably Wednesday Oz time, Wednesday morning, UK time, for a roundup of this Rotherham game and to look ahead to the following fixtures. But until then, come on, City.